Hello and welcome to the Apex Hours Omnistudio Part 2. My name is Gabriel Ostolaza. I am a Salesforce certified instructor and I teach most of the classes or all of the classes for SFI, Salesforce Industries, plus the admin class. Today, I'm going to cover two use cases to explain the functionality of the Omniscripts. One is going to be into an insurance org, and it's going to be an Omniscript for quoting a business process. In other words, use services, aligning web components, collecting the data in order to buy an insurance, then configuring some of the terms and conditions of that insurance and assign the right price, and then finalize the configuration of a quote. The second example is going to be on the comms industry, and it's going to be an Omniscript for e-commerce. So to buy products from a catalog. Okay, we call it a digital commerce Omniscript. So first of all, we are going to review a couple of ideas of Omniscripts. They are uniquely identified by the type, subtype, and language. The name is just a label. And we are going to use Lightning Web Component enabled Omniscript. So you will see that most of the components are Lightning Web components. And they are going to be listed as type and subtype, and then the names will appear below as each of the versions. To build an Omniscript, basically, you need to build them by going to the tab, Build tab, and then dragging and dropping elements that later on are going to be configured on the Properties tab. Okay, when you select one component, the properties will appear on the right. And while on preview, you're going to have a document object model or JSON DOM that is going to be maintained throughout the execution of the Omniscript, and is going to get all the responses from all the elements, regardless if they are Lightning Web components or if they are services or methods from a class or data raptors or whatever type of action. Remember the categories of components: actions, display, functions, groups, inputs, and Omniscripts. We are going to focus basically on Lightning Web components and services in that part. Troubleshooting tips. Well, in the preview, when you are in design, clicking on preview button, you will have the data JSON, and from the data JSON, you can either copy it all, or you can just see the content to verify what information has been retrieved from a data raptor, from a method, through a remote action, through an HTTP, or through any type of action, okay, or even what the user has entered throughout the execution of the Omniscript. There is another component that is very useful, which is the action debugger. And the action debugger is going to include all the interactions of the Omniscript with external resources like integration procedures, data raptors, remote actions, HTTP actions, etc. And for almost everyone is going to have the remote Apex class, Apex method, that's going to be static for integration procedures. The method is going to be the type and the subtype. And then you're going to have the options in case you have entered any options, and then request, and then you will have here the response data, right? So this is very, very useful for troubleshooting when you are building your Omniscript. See what the remote action has returned, and if it is not what you expect, then you will check what you have sent, because if you don't send the correct parameters, you will not get the correct answer. So quoting business process, services, aligning web components. Let's start with the first part. In quoting business process, we have three different parts in your Omniscript. We have the user input, so you're going to create steps. On those steps, people are going to collect data or enter data. Then you're going to get the products and the prices of those products. In that case, a product is an insurance. Now, between this first and second step, you're going to execute what we call a service. Those services, most of the times, are included into or launched by Lightning Web Components. This service is called Get Rated Products, and it is built out of the box by Velocity. You just need to provide it the correct parameters. Also, from product rates, before creating the quotes, you are going to have also another service, which is called Create Update Quote. And then once you have created the quote, there is another service that is called Get Quote Detail. We're going to talk briefly about all of those, but I will demo it, okay, with a hands-on exercise. Well, to review the Lightning Web Component results, there's two ways. One is raw JSON, and nobody would like to see a screen with this raw JSON. So that's the reason for building up a Lightning Web Component. The service is going to return this format, but the Lightning Web Component is going to convert this into a readable, nice look and feel, okay, for the user. Now, a service is basically a method of an Apex class, and as I said, it's going to be defined by the method name, which is normally Velocity Open Interface 2, and then the signature. That's basically you know, the class, definition of the class, and the name. Okay, it's going to be the name of the service that we normally use. Now, it's going to need some input JSON. Depending on the type of service, it will need well, some inputs or others, and then it's going to provide the output results. And there is a bunch of options. Some of them are obligatory, some of them are optional, and all that is described in the documentation. Then calling a service, you can call it by a remote action, right? And you use a remote action when you do not need any user visualization of the data, or you can use a custom Lightning Web Component when you want to visualize. For example, when you want to create a quote, maybe you don't want to display anything to the user, then you will use a remote action. However, when you want to call the catalog of products, then you're going to use a custom Lightning Web Component because you want to show the results to the user, and then the user can configure the terms and conditions of this policy. So to specify the information to match service, you need the name of the class. And again, this is going to be the class name, the method, that is going to be the name of the service, and then eventually some options. Some of them are mandatory, some other are optional. So let's see an example. For the remote class, INS quote service, remote method get quote details. So you're going to get the details of the quote. What it is it logic to send the quote ID? Because you want to get details of that quote, right? And you're going to use a merge variable syntax. Remember, percentages and then percentage at the end, and in the middle, the node, the JSON node name that appears in the JSON DOM. And then you might add the additional parameter like is multi-root. This is for health insurance when you have more than one root product assigned to your users or your census, your group of users. Another example, you know, you have these Velocity INS OS Grid product selection. This is a Lightning Web Component, and the Lightning Web Component is automatically going to launch the service for you, right? Now, here in the properties, when you configure the properties of this Lightning Web Component, those properties make reference to that Lightning Web Component. But because the Lightning Web Component is sending, okay, or calling the service, then how do you configure the properties that the service needs? Well, you're going to edit the properties as JSON, right? And in the JSON blob that appears, you are going to add products action. Now, this products action, it's automatically telling the Lightning Web Component that those properties are not for him. Those properties are for the action. And then you need to specify the class name, class method, and inside the options map, then you will provide all the parameters or properties that are needed for the service. Okay, that's pretty important. Then you have for each service in the action debugger, the remote class, the method, the options, the request data, and the response, as I said earlier on, and you can copy for example, the response, in order to build up a data raptor transform and manipulate the structure of that data. So as I said, in Action Debugger, you can copy, those remote options and remote questions, request or response. The quote ID, you see, is required for this service in order to retrieve, data about this quote. If you make a mistake, for example, here you are missing the O over here, you will get this type of error, right? So cannot get instance of class INS quote service without the O. Collecting data. So for collecting data, we might need sometimes to create formulas. For example, the quote effective date that is required in order to create a quote must be with a date and a time. However, I don't want to overcomplicate this for my user. I want user experience and the user interface to be my top priority. So what I'm going to use is a formula in order to convert just a date that I will collect from a user in my Omniscript to a date plus a time. Same thing for the collection of, in the case of a car insurance, the year of manufacturing of the car, the make and the model. We need an instance key, okay, in order to work later on with my services. And this instance key is going to be built by the auto year, auto make, and auto model. Because it's an array and you can have several cars, you put the pipe N in order to create multiple instances in that list. Another example of auto instance key or a person instance key or driver instance key would be the name and the last name, or first name, last name. Okay, you collect them as individual inputs during your Omniscript execution, but then you concatenate them to send them as the unique identifier of this element. You can use also data raptor loads in order to create elements that you need. For instance, we are going to create an account and we are going to create a contact. This Omniscript that we are going to build assumes that we are not a context Omniscript. You don't need to enter any context ID and it will be launched from any page, right? Because an internal data raptor load is going to create for us an account and a contact with the data that has been entered in the Omniscript. We will see that. Then we need rated products. And for that, we're going to use Lightning web components that are called get eligible products, services that are get eligible products, get rated products, or reprice products. Those services are going to be launched by Lightning web components because the response of those services need to be presented to the user. Now, the first one, get eligible products, it's just going to return the product ID. We will provide as parameters or as options the filters that are going to filter only some eligible products. It's very similar, okay? Of course, you need an effective date, you need the filters, and in the filters, you can identify any field of the policy, right? Including custom fields. So in that case, we use the type, and the type is a custom field added by Velocity. Is Velocity INS type C, and the value is business. You can also include, some filter attributes if you like. You can filter with attributes. Similar get rated products does the same thing, but instead of providing only the product ID, is going to provide all the structure of the product. So coverages, insured items, insured parties, and very important, the price, okay, of that insurance, of that policy, right? You also need as input the same thing, effective date, product eligibility rules, and then filters, right? The key differences is that it's going to provide a bigger result. And then this can be provided by a Lightning web component. So the Omniscript is going to have the action request, and it could be launched by a remote action if you don't need to provide the answers to the users, or by a Lightning web component. Then you will execute the service, get rated products, and it will interrogate my catalog of products. It will use, of course, a filter, right? And then I will provide the response, okay, the product instance in JSON, If it is get rated products, then I will provide the details and I will provide the price. So this is the input that I'm going to send to that service, and it's going to give me, the result. And again, the result is going to be provided in JSON, but through a Lightning Web Component, I will convert it into a visual, easy to read thing. So get rated products, as I said, needs an effective date, needs filters. You can eventually provide out the product code, right? Just one product or one insurance, right? You can eventually include optional flags, include input keys, like for the car insurance, aggregate by key. So you might provide, an aggregation by auto, okay? And you need to specify the instance keys, like auto instance key or driver instance key. Then you have another service that is automatically launched as well by the Lightning Web Component. That is the reprice product. So if you change a term while buying this insurance, then you will be able to reprice it automatically. So those are the different types of Lightning Web Components out of the box, depending on the type of insurance. For example, if it is a home insurance, maybe you just have one product. It's a single product, right? But if you are in a car insurance, it's a multi-instance. And if you have cars and many drivers per car, this would be probably a multi-instance grandchildren, because you have the cars as childs and the drivers as grandchilds. Okay, so for all of that, Velocity has built a bunch of Lightning Web Components, and documentation about that it's available. So this is the first INS product selection. Only one business policy is going to be selected: single business 1 or Stratus business 1. Okay. The second one, INSO's single instance, is another representation of that. And you can, as you see, select the terms and conditions. If you change the terms and conditions, the individual prices for those coverages will change, and also the total price will change. We will see an example of that. Then you have multi-instance. I'm going to go quickly. This is the INS OS multi-instance grandchildren. So you have the cars, right? But below the cars, you have the drivers, and you can either edit the drivers or you can add additional drivers. And this is what you're going to pay for that car. But then you have other cars, so you will pay different amounts for the other cars, and then you have the total of your insurance. So this is why this is called grandchildren, because you have the cars as childs, and then of the policy, and then the drivers as grandchilds. So the properties for the get rated products, okay, you can have those properties to indicate the properties of the service inside, remember, inside the properties of the Lightning Web Component. So you need to do edit.json, and then you add all those properties there, okay? And they will affect the service. Then we need to build the quotes. So a couple of services as well. One is to create update quotes, right? This is not going to give any result to the user. And then you have the get quote details that is going to read, okay, some parameters of the quote to display to the user. So this second one, get quote details, might be launched by a Lightning Web Component. And this is the Lightning Web Component that will launch this service, which is called INS OS confirmation. Instead of that, you can use a step, and you can create, inputs inside that step that will point to the responses of the previous method or previous service. Create update quote is going to need, configure products. So it's going to create those products as quote line items. It needs an effective date. It needs, insure items, opportunity, because it needs to create a quote from an opportunity and eventually an account. Okay. So again, as before, you have an action request from the Omniscript. Then it's going to launch the service, create update quotes, and is going to build up the quote from an opportunity, and is going to build the quote line items from all the opportunity line items. So the insured items, insured parties, and coverages are going to become quote line items, and it's going to return a quote ID. So after this create update quote, we can query details about these quotes, okay, to display them to the user. So this is the input that you need. You need a product configuration detail, right? A node that is going to contain, well, all the information about the policy. And you need the opportunity ID, right? And then you have insured items and additional fields and effective date, right? So all of that is necessary in order to build up the quote. And then you will get as result, as output, the quote ID. And the quote ID will be used by further services. So add this as a remote component, create update quote, and you are going to put all the previous data inside a node called input key, right? In our case, the value of the input key or the JSON node is going to be quote JSON, and you're going to do that by a data raptor transform, right? And you also need to provide a price book, because in order to create an order, Salesforce requires a price book. But this is not going to be used for pricing. This is just a requirement to create an order, right? Sorry, a quote. So existing quote ID, and then we are going to get the details of that quote, okay? It's like the configured products, the insured items, and the quote field values, right? You can get that from a field set. So you can build up in the quote, okay, a field set for all these details. And as input, you only need the quote ID, and then you're going to get all those results, right? So as I said, on the right, you have the outputs, including the configuration details, the insured items, and the quote detail field set. So if in the quote you have a field set, that will be the one that will be used to trigger all those fields from the quote. So you give the quote ID, and again, if you are in a health insurance group health case, okay, you can put is multi-route true, and then it will provide several products. And you have an INS OS confirmation Lightning Web component to display the results. So let's go to the example. Well, this is the data raptor, okay, transform that you're going to use to create the quote confirm, because the Lightning Web component to display that needs a JSON node where it's going to find all the fields inside, like the expedition date, product name, record number, and then total amount, right? The price of this insurance. So you can find more documentation on the Velocity community portal, or the community portal. And we are going to do a short demo of that. So let me show you a demo of this Omniscript. So, oops, sorry. We do have here my Omniscript that is going to start by a step called business info, where I'm going to ask my users to give me the business name, business type, annual revenue, legal form, where I'm going to use a formula to concatenate the date with the time, because this parameter is required later on by one of the services, and then the quote effective date that is going to be the source of that formula. Then I will have a data raptor transform to convert all those inputs into the format that is required to give it to a service, right? And this service is called Velocity INS OS single instance. This is a Lightning Web component into the second step. And if you look at the properties, there is no properties here. So why? Because if you add properties here, they will refer to the Lightning Web component. And I don't want properties on the Lightning Web component. I want properties on the service that is going to be launched by this Lightning Web component. Where do I do that? I click on Edit Properties as JSON. And here you will see there is a init action, right? Class name, and then class method, get rated products. Which products am I going to get? If you take a look at that, in the options map, there is a node called filters. And as filter, I'm going to use product code equals SB1. In other words, I am only going to get the insurances or the products that which code is single business 1, right? So that's going to limit to only one policy. If we didn't indicate that filter, then we will trigger by this service all the policies configured in this system, right? Then we have a reusable Omniscript, and this reusable Omniscript is downloadable from the BPL, and it's to create a new business account in Lightning Web Component. It creates an account and it creates a contact, right, with the information that is going to be entered in the previous steps. Then we are going to create the opportunity, and again, this is a Data Raptor post just to create an opportunity under the account that was created in this reusable Omniscript, and then we will transform, okay, use a Data Raptor transform to prepare all the inputs that are required by this create quote. Now, this create quote, as I said earlier on, doesn't need to provide anything to the user, so we use a remote action instead of using a Lightning Web Component. And then you have a Data Raptor to extract information from the quote, and we're going to use a Lightning Web Component into the final step just to display a summary of the 3-4 fields that are required. Okay, so let's do a preview and see that in action. So I click on preview. I do not need to enter any context ID. Why? Because I am going to create the account automatically with a Data Raptor load. So I do not need, okay, to do that. I'm going to close that for the moment to have more space. Business name, I'm going to start typing Gabo teaching, just anything. Business type, this is a velocity pick list. I'm going to choose teaching. Annual revenue, I'm going to put 1 million. And then legal form is going to be sole property. And I'm going to click on effective date, probably, I don't know, 24th. And I click next, right? Now it's going to launch in the next step, right, the product. And this is a Lightning Web Component that behind the scenes is launching get rated products. And it has retrieved, because of the filter, only one, which is the SB1. But as you see, the deductible is a term that is configurable. That depends on the way you have configured this product behind the scenes. So the services are aligned to the product configuration. You see that the price of this first coverage is 48, and the second coverage is 2,100. If I change, for example, the deductible to 5%, it's going to launch automatically the repricing, and you see the price has changed in both coverages, and also the total price over here. If you change also the limits, okay, which are terms of the coverages, it will change also this price. It will invoke the repricing. Then I click next, and I am going to need to enter all the information for creating the account and for creating the contact, which is going to be the holder of this policy, right? On some additional business information. For simplicity, I have added a set values inside the step, and this set values is going to auto-populate or pre-fill all those fields. And that's great, okay? Because it's going to save me time while I am testing. Then I click on create account. That's just the next button, but it has been relabeled. And since I exit this step, it's going to enter into the next action, which is going to be the reusable Omniscript that is going to use all this data in order to create the account, right? And then I'm going to get the last Lightning Web Component to display information about this policy. So the quote number, so about this quote, the quote number, then the name of the product, SB1, when it expires, and then the total cost, okay, or the premium of this policy. Great. So that's the first example I wanted to talk about with an insurance industry. And as you see, most of my Omniscript components rely on existing components in the velocity package, right? So I'm using Lightning Web Components out of the box. I'm using services out of the box. So I just need to drag and drop, right? The second scenario is going to be based on communications industry, digital commerce, right? I'm going to buy products from a catalog. So it's going to display, okay, my items. I could have phones, I can have tablets, I can have internet access, I can have wearables, whatever, with the attributes for each of those components, right? This is the digital commerce look and feel. I can also use what we call the cart-based guided selling. Okay, that is a little bit deprecated because it uses Angular technology, but it is a velocity cart that is embedded into the steps in the Omniscript. You can decide which steps are going to show this cart and which steps are not. And it will be at the bottom of the step, and clicking on these two lines, it will open, the cart, and you will see the products added to the cart. You can configure them. If you click on this, it will show the window on the right, and then you can also change the cardinality, the quantity of products, delete, clone, etc. And you see the recurring charge and the one-time charge. Okay. Now, my digital commerce guided selling is going to have multiple steps. And well, the main difference of the cart-based and the digital commerce is that cart-based is for internal users only. You cannot expose that to external users, and you need to have an account, okay, to start with, and an opportunity to hold the products meanwhile you are buying your products. Okay, it is Angular-based, so you need HTML templates, and it uses the shared catalog, EPC, right? And it uses the cart-based APIs, and it uses Salesforce servers only, right? Whether the digital commerce can do, and this is the main difference, anonymous browsing. What does it mean, anonymous browsing? It means that you don't have to start with an opportunity or an account or a quote. You are just having a basket, and then in this basket, the users are adding products, and only when they click on the checkout button, then it will create for you, okay, an opportunity, and then it will put all those products as opportunity line items. Okay, it uses digital commerce web components that are pre-built out of the box. You might also download and get access to a software development kit in case you want to develop your front end. And it's exactly the same thing, tied to the enterprise product catalog, and it's using the DC, digital commerce cacheable APIs. Now, this can use Salesforce servers, and it does use Salesforce servers, but it can use also off-platform server, mainly for the caching. It has a lot of caching mechanisms to accelerate and improve the performance. Yeah. So a lot of things can be downloaded from the configurations velocity process library or industry process library, and the Omniscript that we are going to show has been downloaded from this industry process library. It contains a parent catalog, and this parent catalog has some child catalogs. You see, you have mobile is the parent catalog, phone is the child catalog, then you have tablets, and then you have wearables. In the phones, okay, you're going to have this set of telephones, and you can choose them, and then in the second step, you're going to configure them. Okay, when you configure, click on one characteristics, a runtime attribute, it will just highlight it in red, right? And then you will get the price, recurring and one time, and then you can add them to the cart. And as I said, only when you do the checkout, this is my cart. So this is stored in JSON, yeah, in something we called a basket, right? And only when you click on this checkout, it's going to, behind the scenes, take the information from my basket and then create your order, or create your quote, or create your opportunity, and then add opportunity line items, quote line items, or order line items, depending on what you have decided to build. So those are the steps in order to configure: build sales catalog, initialize this catalog in the cache, configure guided selling sample app. In our case, we have decided to use an Omniscript. You can use your app into your digital commerce portal, right? And then configure it, to use your sales catalog and rules, because you're using all the rules and all the intelligence of the CPQ, okay, behind the scenes. And configure the selling end and launching points. Selling end normally is a navigate action if you use an Omniscript, and then launching point is normally a velocity action or Omnistudio action that will launch this Omniscript from a record page. So inside the proper Omniscript, you have different sections, like the browse section, just looking at your catalog. Configure, once you have added one product to the cart, you can change the attributes. Then verification of the components of your cart. And then last but not least, the checkout, where you're going to create the order, add the order line items, and then enter, for example, your billing information and shipping information, right? So those are the sections, right? And you do all those sections. Normally with each of those are Lightning Web Components inside steps. So first of all, you initialize values, normally with the set values. Then you have 3 Lightning Web Components into the first step. The first one is to retrieve parent catalogs. Second one is to retrieve child catalogs of this parent. And third is to get the products of this child catalog. In our case, it's going to be mobile phones. In the second one, you're going to configure the products. In the third one, you are going to click checkout and display all the products in the cart. Right? No, first of all, display the products in the cart. And when you click on the checkout, it's going to launch a reusable Omniscript that is going to do all the collection of information for shipping, information for billing, right? And at the end, you are going to create the order. Yeah, sorry, submit the order. Yeah. So let's do this demo. And with that, we will finish this video. So here we go. No, here we go. I'm going to restart that from the beginning. Or maybe, first of all, I'm going to show you the design. So in the design, you have initial values. I'm just going to use the catalog code mobile. I'm going to just define that statically to save some time. Then I might want to use a data raptor to extract the region and the zone. Why? Because I am doing anonymous browsing. So I do not have an account or an order in which I can find an account. And therefore, I'm going to need a data raptor to read the region. And some telephones are going to be available for one region and not for another. You might think about a 5G. Maybe you have coverage in one region and not in another. So you might offer this service only in particular regions. Then you have the set values and other set values for preparing the value that you're going to use in your service. Then you have the first step, which is select offer with the 3 Lightning Web Components. One to get the parent catalogs, one to get the child catalogs, and one to get the offers. In other words, the products that are inside this child catalog, right? The second, configure order, is going to have only 1 Lightning Web Component, that is to configure all the settings of your products. And then the last one is to verify, okay, the components in your cart. When you click on the checkout, okay, then you will move into a child Omniscript or reusable Omniscript that is going to collect payment information and then make the interaction with a charging gateway or billing gateway, and then the information for shipping, okay, or billing, shipping and billing information. So let's go and display or do a demo of that Omniscript. So as you see, I'm not entering any context ID, right? Because I don't need it. Or I mean, I have one probably here. Yeah, because I need that account to get the region and the zone. So that's why I had to enter, an account here. But there is no order at the beginning, right? In the first step, I could choose any other parent catalog, but I'm going to choose mobiles. Under mobiles, I do have phones, right? And the phones have not loaded for some reason. Let me click refresh again. Okay, now they have loaded, and I'm going to choose, for example, I only see 3, so I'm going to load more. And this is because I have put in the Lightning Web component a limit of 3, and I only want to show 3 phones. But if you click load more, it's going to allow you, okay, to load more phones. And this takes some time because this is the first time I run this Omniscript. But if you work with the caching and you prepare all your information in the cache, mainly when you're using an external cache, it will accelerate a lot this process. Come on. It's taking a while. I don't know why it's taking so long. Normally it doesn't take so long. Let me start again. Maybe the fact that it didn't load the catalog on the first try was giving an error. So I will start from scratch. So it's loading my parent catalogs, it's loading my phones. And if I click load more, yeah, now it's loading more. So I have the Google Pixel, I've got the Apple iPhone X, I have the Apple iPhone 8, even I can load more. And it will now load 3 more. Every time I click on load more. So I'm gonna probably use the Galaxy S8, you know, this one. I click on it. And now I need to configure it. So most of the, to save time, most of the parameters are design time. And I have decided not to make them selectable, but I'm going to select the color. So when you click on this color, it will become red. And that means that this is the color that will be shipped. The price, no, there's no recurring price in that case. I click add to the cart. And now my product is going to be added to the virtual basket. So for the moment, there is no, I can continue shopping. But for the moment, there is no order in place. Now, once I click on the checkout, it's going to invoke this reusable Omniscript. And this reusable Omniscript is going to have all the shipping information. So I'm going to just select one that I have in memory. I'm going to select that the shipping is the same as the billing, right? And I'm going to click next just to accelerate the demo and save some time. And now I have an interaction with the gateway, payment gateway. So I'm going to enter my, not my Amex, right? I will enter probably a dummy credit card. Okay, I will enter the expiry date, 10/24, a couple of CVVs, 444, and then a postal code. Yeah, my postal code doesn't matter. Submit payment. Yep. So apparently it has worked. And now I have a summary, okay, of my order. This is my contact information. This is my billing address. This is my shipping address. This is my payment details. So I click next. And now the system is going to submit, you know, this information, and it has created an order with this number. So if you go to the list of orders, then you will have this order submitted, and that will trigger, okay, the order management in order to decompose my commercial products into technical products, and then do the orchestration plan and, you know, ship the phone to the customer, build it, you know, to the credit card, and so on. So I hope you have enjoyed this session and looking forward to the next. Thank you very much. And I will now stop recording.